So for unit 5, we're going to be looking at range, variance, standard deviation, and 5-number summary. So to begin with, the range. The range is a very important number. It's the difference between the lowest and the highest values. So here, for example, my list up here, my lowest number is a 2. The biggest number is 36. So the distance between them, that means the difference between them is basically subtract them. The large one minus the little one. So in this case, 36 minus 2, my range would be 34. Now, a large range, if the number was really big, it will indicate a greater dispersion in the data. So that means that we have a lot of numbers in the data. Now, a small range, so a value that is small, that tells me that it's a less dispersion in the data. So be like, Mr. Leonzo, what's dispersion in the data? What does that mean in English? Okay, so let's take a look. If my numbers are very similar, so there's not much of a difference between the small one and the large number, my numbers are very similar, my range would be a small number. That's basically telling me, yeah, your numbers are pretty about the same. Let's say I went to a high school. I'm in a high school in a campus, and I start asking for the age of everybody, just the students. If I start asking for the age of the students, and let's say I subtract the oldest age minus the youngest age, the number will be pretty small, right? The range on that one will be pretty small. Okay, so that means that all the numbers are pretty much about the same. Now, let's say I go to a professional team, and let's say I go to a soccer team and I start asking for their salaries. Now, soccer, some people make millions and millions of dollars. Let's say we go to LA Galaxy. I think the highest paid right now is Chicharito, but he will be making probably like 1 million and some every year. But there is a person, and probably more than one. There's a few people that make very little money. And they probably don't. We never see them play. They're the bench warmers, and probably they don't even get called to every single game. But they are still part of the team. There's people that make very little money. So now imagine I subtract the highest paid minus the lowest paid. Now the difference will be pretty big. So that's what we call a greater dispersion, a big dispersion. So the difference between the smallest and the largest is pretty big. So then we'll be like, all right, our numbers are not pretty fair. Our numbers are pretty different. Okay, so range on our example here, range will be 34. Right? I'm just looking at the highest number minus the small number. But let's take a look at the 5-number summary. So I know I tend to go in order on my notes, but let me come back here to the very bottom. The 5-number summary. So I have the list that we have on the top. I have the exact same list here. Now we're going to call it 5-number summary because there are 5 numbers that are very important besides the range. They're going to be the minimum quartile 1, the medium quartile 3, and the maximum number. What I'm going to do, first of all, let me find the center of my list. Now, the center might be a number. If I have an odd amount of numbers, the center will be a number. But now if I have an even amount of numbers, the centered will not be one of my numbers here. Okay, so let's see. Let me draw the center. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 numbers. So my center, so I'm going to split my numbers, 5 on one side and 5 on the other side. Let me just draw a line here. Notice how I did 5 numbers to the left and 5 numbers to the right. Because the list of my numbers is an even amount of numbers, my centered or my median will not be one of these numbers. I'm going to represent it with the line. Now, what if I had an odd amount of numbers? So let's say I have something like 1, 2, 2, 5, 7, 8, and 9. In that case, my centered will be a number. So when it is a number from my list, I circle it. When it is not a number that is on the list, I do a little line segment. So you guys see the difference of how I mark the center. Now, coming back to my list, so I'm looking at this list, coming back to this list, the lower half, let me find the center of the lower half. Now I have 5 numbers on the left side, so that's an odd amount of numbers. So the center of the left side will be a number. So I'm gonna circle it. It's right there. Now the centered on the upper half, so I'm looking for the numbers 22 through 36, right? There's 5 of those numbers. The number in the center will be this one right here. Okay, so those are important. As a matter of fact, that gives me my quartile 1. So my quartile 1 in this case will be 3. My quartile 3 on the very top, we can see is 35. And then my median, it was the number in the center to begin with. Now we're represented with the line. Notice how it is between 20 and 22. So I'm really thinking which number it is right in between 20 and 22, like right in between them. We can probably see it. We can probably think, yeah, I think a number that is in between 20 and 22, right? It's not too hard to think of it. But what if we couldn't think of it? What if we had a hard time figuring out which one it was? What we're gonna do, we're gonna add the numbers. So I'm just gonna go 20 plus 22 and divide it by 2. So again, if you can see it, awesome. If you cannot see it, add the 2 numbers. The one number to the left and one number to the right. Add the 2 numbers and divide it by 2. 20 plus 22 is 42. 42 divided by 2 is 21. Now, some of you might be like, oh yeah, I knew that. I knew that 21 was in between 20 and 22. Awesome. Sometimes it's easy to see. Sometimes it's not easy to see. You know, we like, well, when is it not easy to see? What if I asked you what number is in between 13.5 and 17.7? Okay, now that one is a little bit more work, right? So things like that are going to happen. Sometimes it's easy to see, sometimes it's not easy to see. Now, the minimum and the maximum, I think the name says it all. The minimum is the smallest numbered, so in this case, 2, and the maximum is the biggest numbered, in this case, 36. Very, very important numbers, so we're going to list them in there. So I'm going to ask you for your first homework. I'm going to ask you guys to find the 5 number summary and also find the range.